Through the spider-webbed driver's side window, he could see her. A woman slumped over the steering wheel, long dark hair covering her face. She wasn't moving. The flames were spreading from the engine compartment, licking along the hood with terrifying hunger. Isaiah knew enough about cars to know what came next. He had minutes at best, maybe seconds. He grabbed the driver's side door handle and yanked. The door gave way with a groan of tortured metal. Smoke poured into his face, acrid and choking. Isaiah ducked low, covering his mouth with his sleeve, and crawled into the passenger seat. With shaking hands, he began sawing through the seatbelt fabric. The fire roared louder, and somewhere in the back of his consciousness, he knew he was running out of time. The blade cut through, and the woman slumped toward him. Isaiah Carter's hands gripped the steering wheel of his 2008 Honda Accord as rain hammered against the windshield like 1,000 angry fists. The wipers scraped across the glass in a rhythm that had become almost hypnotic over the past 40 minutes. Highway 285, just outside Atlanta, stretched before him like a dark ribbon, slick and treacherous under the November storm. He glanced at the dashboard clock. 7:43. He was already late. His phone buzzed in the cup holder, and he didn't need to look to know it was another text from Mrs. Chen, his neighbor who watched Rena and Leah after school on his late shifts. The guilt twisted in his stomach like a knife. His 8-year-old twins had probably already eaten the dinner Mrs. Chen prepared, probably already asked 3 times when Daddy was coming home, probably already tried to hide their disappointment when the answer was, "Soon, sweetheart, soon." Isaiah had been at Hartwell Industries until 7:15, fixing a commercial HVAC unit that had decided to die on the coldest day of the year. As a maintenance technician, he was the last person anyone noticed when things worked, and the first person everyone blamed when they didn't. The pay was barely enough to cover rent, groceries, and the mountain of debt his ex-wife had left behind when she decided motherhood wasn't for her 3 years ago. But it was honest work, and Isaiah had learned long ago that honest work was all a man really had. The rain intensified, and Isaiah eased off the gas pedal. Visibility was dropping fast. He thought about Rena, his firecracker, who'd lost another tooth last week and had been carefully placing it under her pillow every night, waiting for the tooth fairy. He'd forgotten to play the part for 3 nights running, too exhausted to remember. And Leah, quieter than her twin, who'd drawn him a picture of the 3 of them holding hands under a rainbow. She'd used every crayon in the box, and Isaiah had taped it to the refrigerator right next to the overdue electric bill. He was a good father. He knew that much. But some days, good didn't feel like enough. That's when he saw the glow. At first, it registered as just another set of taillights ahead, diffused through the rain. But as his car crested the slight hill, Isaiah's breath caught in his throat. Orange flames were consuming a black sedan on the shoulder of the highway, the fire already climbing toward the sky despite the downpour. Thick smoke billowed from the hood, and the vehicle sat at an unnatural angle, the driver's side crumpled against the guardrail. Isaiah's foot moved to the brake instinctively. His heart began to hammer. 2 cars ahead of him didn't slow. Their red taillights disappeared into the storm, as if they'd seen nothing at all. Maybe they hadn't. Maybe the rain had hidden the worst of it. Or maybe, like Isaiah had done 100 times in his life, they'd made the calculation that it wasn't their problem, wasn't their responsibility, wasn't their emergency. But Isaiah was slowing down. He pulled onto the shoulder about 30 yards before the burning vehicle, his hazard lights flashing weakly against the darkness. For a moment, he just sat there, engine running, wipers still beating their desperate rhythm. Every rational part of his brain was screaming at him. Call 911 and drive away. You have 2 little girls waiting for you. This isn't your fight. You're not a firefighter. You're not a paramedic. You're just a maintenance guy who's already late getting home. But his hand was already reaching for the door handle. The rain hit him like a physical force the moment he stepped out of the car. Within seconds, his work uniform was soaked through. Isaiah ran toward the burning sedan, and as he got closer, his stomach dropped. Through the spider-webbed driver's side window, he could see her, a woman slumped over the steering wheel, long dark hair covering her face. She wasn't moving. The flames were spreading from the engine compartment, licking along the hood with terrifying hunger. Isaiah knew enough about cars to know what came next. He had minutes at best, maybe seconds. He grabbed the driver's side door handle and yanked. Locked. The metal was already hot to the touch. He moved to the passenger side, slipping on the wet grass, nearly losing his footing. The passenger door was crumpled from the impact, but not as badly. He pulled. Nothing. Pulled again, throwing all his weight into it. The door gave way with a groan of tortured metal. Smoke poured into his face, acrid and choking. Isaiah ducked low, covering his mouth with his sleeve, and crawled into the passenger seat. The heat was incredible. He could feel it pressing against his skin, could hear the ominous crackle of the fire feeding on fuel and metal and upholstery. The woman still hadn't moved. "Ma'am!" Isaiah shouted, reaching across to shake her shoulder. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Nothing. Her seatbelt was still fastened. Isaiah's fingers fumbled for the release, but it was jammed, probably from the impact. Of course it was jammed. Nothing was ever easy. The smoke was getting thicker, burning his eyes, searing his lungs. He couldn't see, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. But Rena and Leah flashed through his mind, not as a reason to leave, but as a reason to try harder. He reached down to his belt and pulled out his work knife, a cheap utility blade he used to open boxes and cut wire. With shaking hands, he began sawing through the seatbelt fabric. The fire roared louder, and somewhere in the back of his consciousness, he knew he was running out of time. The blade cut through, and the woman slumped toward him. Isaiah grabbed her under the arms and pulled. She was dead weight, completely unconscious, and the awkward angle made it nearly impossible to get leverage. He planted his feet against the center console and pulled harder, his back screaming in protest. Inch by inch, he dragged her across the passenger seat. An explosion of sound rocked the car, and the flames surged higher. The front tire had blown from the heat. Isaiah didn't let himself think about what would blow next. He just pulled. They tumbled out of the passenger door together, landing hard on the wet grass. Isaiah didn't stop. He hooked his arms under hers and dragged her away from the vehicle, his boots slipping in the mud, his lungs screaming for clean air. 20 feet, 30 feet, 40. He collapsed when they reached the edge of the grass, rolling the woman onto her back. In the flickering light of the burning car, he could finally see her face. She was young, maybe early 30s, with delicate features and an expensive-looking business suit now torn and stained. Blood trickled from a gash on her forehead. Isaiah pressed his fingers to her neck, searching for a pulse. For a terrible moment, he felt nothing. Then, there. Faint, but there. She wasn't breathing. Every first aid video he'd ever half-watched at mandatory work training sessions came flooding back. Isaiah tilted her head back, checked her airway, and began CPR. 30 compressions, 2 rescue breaths. His arms were already exhausted, his hands shaking, but he kept going. 30 compressions, 2 rescue breaths. "Come on," he gasped. "Come on, don't you quit on me." 30 compressions, 2 rescue breaths. Behind him, the sedan erupted in a massive fireball that lit up the night sky. The shockwave of heat washed over them, and Isaiah instinctively covered the woman's body with his own. Metal and glass rained down onto the highway. Someone was screaming in the distance. Or maybe that was just the wind. 30 compressions. 2 rescue breaths. The woman's body suddenly convulsed. She coughed, choked, and gasped in a desperate breath. Her eyes fluttered open for just a moment, unfocused and confused, before closing again. But she was breathing. On her own. She was breathing. Isaiah collapsed beside her, his chest heaving, his whole body trembling. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Red and blue lights began to strobe through the rain. Help was coming. He'd done it. She was alive. That's when the adrenaline started to wear off and the pain hit him all at once. His hands were blistered and raw. His lungs felt like he'd inhaled fire. His back screamed where he'd wrenched it. But none of that mattered, because somewhere in Atlanta, Rena and Leah were waiting for him, and he was going to make it home to tell them good night. Except he didn't make it home that night. The paramedics arrived in a flurry of activity, and Isaiah found himself being examined, questioned, wrapped in a shock blanket. The woman, still unconscious but stable, was loaded into the first ambulance. A paramedic with kind eyes and grey streaks in her hair kept asking Isaiah if he was hurt, and he kept saying no, he was fine. He just needed to get home to his girls. But when he tried to stand, his legs buckled. The kind paramedic caught him, and suddenly, there were hands guiding him to a second ambulance, voices telling him he needed to be checked out, that he'd inhaled a dangerous amount of smoke, that his hands needed treatment. "My daughters," Isaiah managed to say, his voice hoarse and ruined. "I need to call my daughters." Someone handed him a phone. He dialed Mrs. Chen with trembling, bandaged fingers. She answered on the first ring, worry sharp in her voice. Isaiah tried to explain, tried to keep his voice steady so she wouldn't panic the girls, tried to say he'd be home soon. But soon turned into, "I have to go to the hospital for a little while," which turned into Mrs. Chen insisting she'd keep the twins for the night, that they'd be fine, that he should focus on getting better. "Can I talk to them?" Isaiah asked, hating the way his voice broke. "They're already asleep, honey," Mrs. Chen said gently. "I'll tell them you called first thing in the morning. You just take care of yourself. You hear me? Those girls need their daddy healthy." The ambulance doors closed, and Isaiah was alone with strangers, racing toward Grady Memorial Hospital, while his entire body registered the cost of the choice he'd made. His hands throbbed. His lungs burned with every breath. Somewhere on his arm, he was pretty sure he had a second-degree burn he didn't remember getting. But the woman was alive. He didn't know her name. Didn't know if she had children waiting for her, or a spouse, or parents who would have gotten the worst phone call of their lives if Isaiah had driven past. He just knew that when morning came and Rena asked if he was a superhero, he'd be able to tell her the truth. No, sweetheart. Just a daddy who did what any daddy would do. The emergency room was a blur of fluorescent lights and antiseptic smells, and doctors examining him with practiced efficiency. Smoke inhalation, first and second-degree burns on both hands and his right forearm. Strained back muscles, minor lacerations. They wanted to keep him overnight for observation. Isaiah wanted to refuse, wanted to sign whatever waiver they put in front of him and get back to his girls, but his body had other ideas. When they finally settled him into a room and the nurse dimmed the lights, Isaiah lay staring at the ceiling, his bandaged hands resting on his chest. Everything hurt. The pain medication they'd given him took the edge off, but couldn't touch the deeper ache, the one that came from missing bedtime stories and goodnight kisses, from knowing Rena and Leah would wake up without him there to make their breakfast and braid their hair for school. He'd done the right thing. He knew that. But right things came with a cost. And Isaiah had learned long ago that he was always the one who paid it. His phone, rescued from his car and now sitting on the bedside table, buzzed. Mrs. Chen had sent a photo. Rena and Leah curled up together in Mrs. Chen's guest bed, Leah's arm thrown over her sister, both of them peaceful in sleep. The caption read, "Your angels are safe. Rest now." Isaiah's eyes burned with tears that had nothing to do with smoke damage. He let them fall because there was no one there to see, no one to be strong for, just him and the darkness and the weight of every choice he'd ever made. He fell asleep like that, phone clutched in his bandaged hand, dreaming of fires and falling, and two little girls who needed him to come home. Morning came with pale sunlight filtering through the hospital blinds and the sound of a commotion in the hallway. Isaiah woke slowly, disoriented, his mouth dry and his body stiff. For a confused moment, he didn't remember where he was. Then the pain in his hands reminded him of everything. A sharp knock on the door preceded a doctor entering. A young woman with her hair pulled back in a tight bun and an expression that suggested she'd been up all night. "Mr. Carter," she said, glancing at her tablet. "How are you feeling this morning?" "Like I got hit by a truck," Isaiah croaked. "That's to be expected. Your vitals look good, though. Lungs are clear. We'll need to change those bandages and reassess, but I think you'll be able to go home this afternoon." Home. The word had never sounded so good. "The woman from the accident?" Isaiah asked. "Is she okay?" The doctor's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. "I can't discuss other patients, privacy laws, but I can tell you that she's alive, and she wouldn't be if not for you." Isaiah nodded, wincing as the movement pulled at sore muscles. "I just needed to know." The doctor left, and Isaiah was alone again. He managed to call Mrs. Chen, who put Rena on the phone first. "Daddy!" Her voice was bright with worry and excitement. "Mrs. Chen said you're a hero! You saved someone from a burning car like a superhero!" Isaiah's throat tightened. "I just helped someone who needed help, baby girl." "But you're hurt," Rena said, and now the worry overtook the excitement. "Are you coming home? This afternoon, I promise." "Leah wants to talk." There was a shuffling sound, and then Leah's softer voice. "Daddy, I drew you a picture. It's you with a cape." "I can't wait to see it, sweetheart. I love you infinity. I love you infinity +1. After he hung up, Isaiah lay back against the pillows and tried not to think about the bills that were probably already piling up from this hospital stay. He had insurance through work, but it was the bare minimum, with a deductible that might as well have been $1 million. He'd figure it out. He always did. Extra shifts, maybe. Or he could finally sell his dad's old record collection. The girls needed to eat. The girls needed a roof over their heads. The girls needed a father who didn't crack under pressure. The morning wore on. A nurse came to change his bandages, and Isaiah gritted his teeth through the pain. Another nurse brought him something that was allegedly breakfast, but tasted like cardboard. He was just contemplating escape when there was another knock at his door. This time, it wasn't a doctor. 2 men in expensive suits entered his room, and Isaiah knew immediately that something had shifted. The first man was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and the kind of bearing that suggested he was used to being the most important person in any room. The second was younger, built like he spent his mornings in the gym and his afternoons intimidating people for a living. "Mr. Carter," the older man said, his voice cultured and controlled. "My name is Julian Hartwell." The name meant nothing to Isaiah. He sat up straighter in bed, suddenly aware of how he must look. Hospital gown, bandaged hands, 2 days of stubble on his jaw. "Can I help you?" Isaiah asked carefully. Julian Hartwell stepped closer, and Isaiah saw something crack in that controlled expression. "No, Mr. Carter. The question is, what can I do to help you? You saved my daughter's life last night." The world seemed to tilt slightly. "Your daughter?" Victoria Hartwell. She was driving back from a business meeting when she lost control in the storm. "The doctors tell me that if you hadn't pulled her from that vehicle, if you hadn't performed CPR..." His voice broke, just slightly, just enough to show he was human under that expensive suit. "She wouldn't have survived." Isaiah didn't know what to say. "Is she okay?" "She's in critical condition, but stable. Broken ribs, punctured lung, concussion, but alive. Because of you." Julian moved to the chair beside Isaiah's bed and sat down as if his legs would no longer hold him. "I've been at her bedside all night, and all I could think was that I needed to find the man who gave me my daughter back. I needed to thank him." "You don't need to thank me," Isaiah said quietly. "Anyone would have done the same." The younger man in the corner made a sound that might have been a bitter laugh. Julian glanced at him, then back to Isaiah. "Actually, Mr. Carter, the police report indicates that at least 4 vehicles passed the accident before you stopped. 4 people who saw my daughter dying and decided it wasn't their concern. Julian's eyes were bright with unshed tears. You risked your life for a stranger. You have children of your own, the hospital staff told me. Twin daughters. And you still chose to stop. Isaiah thought about Rena and Leah, waiting at home. I chose to stop because I have daughters. I'd hoped someone would do the same for them. Julian Hartwell studied him for a long moment, and Isaiah had the uncomfortable feeling of being assessed, measured, evaluated by someone who was very good at reading people. What do you do for a living, Mr. Carter? I'm a maintenance technician, HVAC mostly. At Hartwell Industries. It wasn't a question. Julian Hartwell had clearly done his homework. Isaiah nodded, and the irony of the situation hit him all at once. He'd saved the daughter of the man who owned the company that barely paid him enough to survive. He'd nearly died pulling her from the flames, while his own children waited at home in a 2-bedroom apartment that was one missed paycheck away from eviction. And now that man was sitting in his hospital room, looking at him like he'd hung the moon. Mr. Carter, Julian said slowly, I'm going to be very direct with you because I don't believe in wasting time. You saved the most precious thing in my world, my only daughter, and I want to do something for you in return. That's not necessary, Isaiah started, but Julian held up a hand. Please, let me finish. He leaned forward. Your medical bills from this incident will be taken care of, all of them. That's non-negotiable. Isaiah's heart lurched. Mr. Hartwell, I can't. You can, and you will. Beyond that, I'd like to offer you a different position within my company. Something that better reflects your character and capabilities. The room felt too small suddenly, the air too thin. Isaiah shook his head. I appreciate it. I really do. But I don't want charity. I don't need a pity promotion. Julian's expression hardened slightly, not with anger, but with something like respect. This isn't charity, Mr. Carter. This is recognition. I've built a company worth billions, and I've done it by identifying talent and character when I see it. Last night, you displayed both. Are you telling me you're not interested in providing a better life for your daughters? The words hit home, and Julian knew it. Isaiah thought about Rena's tooth fairy money he kept forgetting. Leah's crayons that were worn down to nubs because he couldn't afford new ones. The stack of bills on his kitchen counter that grew faster than he could pay them down. What kind of position? He asked, hating himself a little for asking. We can discuss the details when you're recovered. For now, just know that the offer is genuine and it's there when you're ready. Julian stood, and the younger man moved to open the door. I'll leave you to rest, but Mr. Carter, thank you. From a father to a father, thank you for giving me the chance to see my daughter again. They left, and Isaiah was alone with his thoughts and the sudden, terrifying possibility that his life might be about to change. Isaiah was discharged that afternoon with a bag full of prescriptions he couldn't afford and instructions to keep his hands clean and dry, avoid strenuous activity, and follow up with a burn specialist in a week. The nurse who wheeled him out to Mrs. Chen's waiting car gave him a look that suggested she knew exactly how many of those instructions he'd actually be able to follow. Mrs. Chen was a tiny Vietnamese woman in her 70s who had more energy than people half her age and a heart bigger than the state of Georgia. She'd lived next door to Isaiah and the girls for 2 years, and somewhere along the way, she'd stopped being just a neighbor and become family. Those girls had been bouncing off walls all day, she said as she navigated through Atlanta traffic. Rena wants to show you her science project. Leah has been sitting by the window for an hour waiting to see you. Isaiah's chest ached with something that had nothing to do with smoke inhalation. I'm sorry you had to keep them so long. You stop that right now, Mrs. Chen said sharply. You think I don't love those babies like my own grandchildren? You think it's a burden to make them breakfast and braid their hair? She glanced at him, her expression softening. You're a good father, Isaiah Carter. What you did last night. That's the kind of man you are. That's what you're teaching those girls to be. Brave, kind, someone who helps. Isaiah didn't trust himself to speak, so he just nodded and watched the familiar streets of their neighborhood slide past. The apartment complex came into view, a tired-looking building with peeling paint and a parking lot full of potholes. But it was home. It was theirs. Mrs. Chen had barely put the car in park before Rena and Leah came bursting out of the building. Isaiah opened the door, and they crashed into him with the force of two small hurricanes, all arms and tears, and "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy." He wrapped his bandaged hands around them as carefully as he could and held on tight, breathing in the scent of Mrs. Chen's lavender shampoo and the strawberry lotion Leah liked to steal from the bathroom. This was why he'd stopped. This was why he'd run into the fire. Because somewhere, someone loved Victoria Hartwell the way he loved these two fierce, beautiful souls. "Let your daddy breathe, girls," Mrs. Chen said gently. "He's hurt, remember?" They pulled back immediately, and Isaiah saw his own face reflected twice over in their wide brown eyes. Rena's hand flew to her mouth. "Does it hurt bad?" she whispered. "Not too bad," Isaiah lied. "Not when I get to see you two." Leah touched his bandaged hand with one tentative finger. "You're really brave, Daddy." "I'm really lucky," he corrected. "Lucky to come home to you." Mrs. Chen helped him inside and up the stairs to their second-floor apartment. The girls hovered around him like anxious birds while he settled onto the worn couch. Rena disappeared and returned with her science project. A volcano made from papier-mâché and painted with more enthusiasm than accuracy. Leah brought him the picture she'd drawn, and yes, there he was with a bright red cape flying behind him. Mrs. Chen made them all dinner, refused Isaiah's protests about how much she'd already done, and finally headed home around 8 with instructions to call her if he needed anything at all. Bedtime was a negotiation, as it always was. Rena wanted to sleep on the couch next to Daddy to make sure he was okay. Leah wanted Daddy to sleep in their room. Isaiah, who could barely keep his eyes open, managed to convince them that everyone would sleep better in their own beds, that he was perfectly fine, that he'd be right here in the morning. He read them 2 chapters from their current favorite book, a fantasy story about a girl who could talk to animals and tuck them in with kisses and promises. When he finally made it to his own bedroom, he collapsed onto the mattress, still fully dressed, and was asleep before he could think about taking his medication. The next few days blurred together. Isaiah called in sick to work, which he hated doing, but his hands made it impossible to do his job. He spent the time healing, playing quiet games with the girls, and trying not to look at the mail piling up on the counter. Rena went back to school and told her entire class about her hero Daddy. Leah drew him 3 more pictures of him in various superhero poses. On the 4th day, a courier arrived at his door with a package. Inside was a letter on heavy cream stationery that probably cost more than Isaiah's entire wardrobe. The handwriting was elegant but shaky, like someone had written it while recovering from an injury. "Mr. Carter," it read, "I'm told you're the reason I'm alive to write this letter. I don't remember the accident. I don't remember you pulling me from the car, but I remember waking up in a hospital room with my father crying beside me, and I remember him telling me about the maintenance worker who risked everything to save me. I'm sorry you were hurt. I'm grateful beyond words that you stopped. When I'm well enough, I'd very much like to meet you properly and thank you in person. Until then, please accept this small token of my gratitude. Victoria Hartwell." Beneath the letter was an envelope. Isaiah opened it with shaking hands and found a check. He had to count the zeros twice to believe what he was seeing. $50,000. His knees went weak, and he sat down hard on the couch. $50,000. That was more than he made in a year. That was every bill on his counter paid off with enough left over for the girls' college fund. That was breathing room. That was security. That was a future he'd stopped letting himself imagine. He should have felt relieved, grateful. Instead, he felt vaguely sick. Isaiah had grown up poor. He'd learned early that when people with money did something nice for you, it usually came with strings attached. They wanted something. They wanted to feel good about themselves. They wanted control. His ex-wife had come from money, and she'd never let him forget that she was slumming it by being with him. Every fight had ended with some variation of, "I could have done so much better." He didn't want to be someone's charity case. He didn't want to be the feel-good story that Julian Hartwell told at dinner parties. But more than that, he didn't want his daughters to go without, because his pride was too big to accept help. Rena wandered into the living room, still in her pajamas, even though it was almost noon. "What you looking at, Daddy?" Isaiah folded the check and put it back in the envelope. "Just some mail, baby girl. Can we have pancakes?" "Sure. Go wake up your sister." While the girls got dressed, Isaiah stared at that envelope for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and called the number listed at the bottom of Victoria's letter. A professional-sounding woman answered. "This is Isaiah Carter," he said. "I need to speak with Victoria Hartwell." There was a pause. "Ms. Hartwell is still recovering and not taking calls. May I take a message?" "Tell her thank you for the check. Tell her it's too much. And tell her I'd like to meet her too, when she's well enough." "I'll pass along your message, Mr. Carter." He hung up and went to make his daughter's pancakes with the last of the pancake mix and the very last of his pride. 2 days later, his phone rang from an unknown number. When he answered, a warm, slightly hoarse voice said, "Mr. Carter, this is Victoria Hartwell. I'm told you think my gratitude is too much." Isaiah had to sit down. He hadn't expected her to call personally. "Miss Hartwell, I wasn't expecting. How are you feeling?" "Like I was hit by a car and then had my chest cracked open by surgeons, so not great, but alive, which is apparently your fault." There was humor in her voice, dry and self-aware. "And please, call me Victoria. I think you've earned the right to first names." "Then I'm Isaiah." "Isaiah. Biblical name. It means God is salvation, doesn't it?" "Something like that. My grandmother picked it." "She chose well." There was a pause, and he heard her take a careful breath. "I'm calling because my assistant said you think the check is too much. I want to understand why you turned down money that could help your daughters." The directness caught him off guard. "I'm not turning it down. I don't know. It feels weird. Taking money for doing what anyone should have done." "But everyone didn't do it," Victoria said quietly. 4 cars passed me, Isaiah. 4 people saw me dying and decided their evening plans were more important. You stopped. You risked your life. You have burns on your hands that will probably scar, and you're telling me you don't deserve compensation for that. It's not about deserving. It's about, I don't want to be your good deed, your feel-good story. Is that what you think this is?" Her voice had gone sharp. "I'm lying in a hospital bed with a tube in my chest, and you think I'm trying to feel good about myself. I didn't mean, I know what you meant. You think because my family has money, we're out of touch, that we throw cash at problems and call it kindness." She coughed, a painful sound that made Isaiah wince in sympathy. "Maybe you're right. Maybe that is what we do sometimes. But this isn't that. This is me trying to do something, anything, to acknowledge what you lost by choosing to save me. I didn't lose anything. You didn't. You're not missing work right now because your hands are burned. You're not going to have medical bills that will follow you for years. Your daughters didn't spend a night terrified they might lose their father." Her voice cracked. "You lost something, Isaiah. You paid a price. And the fact that you paid it willingly doesn't mean the debt isn't real." Isaiah closed his eyes. "I have 2 little girls who need to learn that you help people because it's right, not because you get rewarded for it." "Then teach them that. Use the money and teach them that sometimes kindness is rewarded, that the world isn't always cruel and unfair, that sometimes when you do the right thing, good things can happen." Victoria's breathing sounded labored now. "I need to go, but Isaiah, I still want to meet you in person, when I can stand up for more than 5 minutes without passing out. Will you let me do that?" "Yeah," Isaiah said softly. Yeah, I'd like that. And the check? He looked at the envelope on the coffee table. I'll cash it. For my girls. For you too. You matter just as much as they do. She hung up before he could argue. 3 weeks passed. Isaiah's hands healed slowly, the bandages growing smaller, the pain fading to a dull ache. He went back to work and found his locker decorated with a banner that read Hero and a cake in the break room with his name on it. His co-workers treated him differently now, with a respect that felt both validating and uncomfortable. He was the same person he'd been before the accident. He'd just made a choice. The check sat in his bank account untouched for a week before he finally started using it. First, he paid off the medical bills that had started arriving in avalanches. Then the credit card debt from his ex-wife's shopping sprees. Then the back rent he'd been juggling. Then he took Rena and Leah to a toy store and told them they could each pick one thing, anything they wanted. And the looks on their faces were worth more than any amount of money. Julian Hartwell called him personally to discuss the job offer. It wasn't in maintenance, it was in operations management, overseeing workplace safety and employee welfare across all Hartwell Industries facilities. The salary was 3 times what Isaiah currently made. The benefits included health insurance that would actually cover things and a college fund matching program for his daughters. I don't have a degree, Isaiah pointed out. I barely finished high school. You have something better, Julian said. You have integrity. You have courage. You have the ability to make hard decisions under pressure. I can teach you business. I can't teach character. Isaiah accepted the position, signed the papers, and felt like he was stepping into someone else's life. His first day in the new role was terrifying. He had an office, an actual office with a door and a window and a desk that didn't have mysterious stains on it. His new colleagues were educated, polished people who used words like synergy and optimization, and Isaiah spent the first week certain he'd be exposed as a fraud. But slowly, he found his footing. When he did facility walkthroughs, he saw things other people missed because he'd lived that life. He knew which safety shortcuts workers took when they thought no one was looking. He knew which equipment was one malfunction away from disaster. He knew how to talk to maintenance crews and janitorial staff because he'd been them. 1 month after the accident, Victoria called again. I'm being released from the hospital tomorrow, she said. I was wondering if you and your daughters might like to visit me at my father's house this weekend. I'd really like to meet the girls. Isaiah hesitated. Victoria, you don't have to do this. I know I don't have to. I want to. Please. That Saturday, Isaiah dressed Rena and Leah in their nicest outfits and drove to an address in Buckhead that made his stomach clench with anxiety. The Hartwell estate wasn't just a house. It was a mansion. All white columns and manicured lawns and a driveway that could have fit 10 of Isaiah's apartments. Is this a castle? Leah whispered, her eyes huge. Something like that, baby. A man in an actual butler's uniform answered the door and led them through rooms that looked like museum exhibits. Rena grabbed Isaiah's hand and held on tight. Leah pressed against his other side. They were all out of their depth, and they all knew it. But then they stepped out onto a back terrace, and there she was. Victoria Hartwell sat in a cushioned chair overlooking a garden, wrapped in a soft blanket despite the mild weather. She was thinner than in the photos Isaiah had seen online, her skin pale, her movements careful. But when she saw them, her whole face transformed with a smile that was warm and genuine and made her beautiful. Isaiah, she said and started to stand. Don't get up, Isaiah said quickly, moving forward. Please. She settled back down, and her eyes moved to Rena and Leah, who were doing their best impression of shy mice. And you must be the famous twins. I'm Victoria. You're the lady Daddy saved, Rena said bluntly. I am. Your daddy is very brave. We know, Leah said quietly. He's the bravest person in the world. Something in Victoria's expression cracked. Will you sit with me for a minute? I want to tell you something. The girls looked at Isaiah, who nodded. They perched on the edge of chairs like birds ready to fly at the first sign of danger. Isaiah sat too, feeling awkward and too large in this delicate setting. Victoria leaned forward, addressing the girls with complete seriousness. I want you to know that I think about your daddy every single day. Every time I take a breath without it hurting too much. Every time I eat breakfast or read a book or look at the sky. I think about how I wouldn't be here without him. And I think about how you could have lost your daddy because he chose to save me. That's a gift I can never fully repay. Rena's chin came up. Daddy says you don't owe us anything. Your daddy is a very humble man, but I disagree. Victoria smiled. I think I owe you all everything, and I'd like to be your friend if you'll let me. Not because I have to, because I want to. Why? Leah asked, with the brutal honesty of 8-year-olds. Victoria considered the question seriously. Because I spent a lot of my life surrounded by people who wanted things from me. My money, my family's influence, my connections. But you don't want anything from me, do you? You just want your daddy to be happy and safe. That's really rare and precious. And I'd like to know people like that. Rena and Leah exchanged one of their twin looks, an entire conversation passing in a glance. Then Rena said, Okay, we can be friends. But if you hurt our daddy, we'll be very mad, Leah added. Victoria laughed, then winced and pressed a hand to her ribs. Deal. I promise not to hurt your daddy. They stayed for 2 hours. Victoria showed the girls her garden, explaining the names of flowers and letting them pick a few to take home. She asked them about school and their favourite books, and whether they liked science or art better. She listened to their answers like they mattered. Like these 2 little girls from a 2-bedroom apartment had something valuable to say. And Isaiah watched, something tight in his chest slowly loosening. This wasn't what he'd expected. He'd expected guilt from Victoria, obligation, maybe pity. But this felt like something else entirely. This felt like genuine connection. When it was time to leave, Victoria walked them to the door slowly, one hand pressed to her side. At the threshold, she caught Isaiah's arm. Thank you for coming, she said quietly, for letting me meet them. They're wonderful. They're my whole world. I can see that. She looked up at him, and her eyes were bright with emotion. My mother died when I was 12. Car accident. My father threw himself into work, and I grew up mostly alone in this big house with nannies and tutors, and not a lot of actual family. Seeing you with your daughters, it reminded me what I lost, but also what I might still find. Isaiah didn't know what to say to that, so he just squeezed her hand gently. Come back next week, Victoria asked. I promise to have better entertainment. Maybe a movie. Do the girls like movies? They love movies. Then it's a date. Not a date, just a, you know what I mean. Isaiah smiled. Yeah, I know what you mean. In the car on the way home, Rena announced, I like her. She's nice. She's sad, Leah added. But nice. Isaiah glanced at them in the rearview mirror. She's been through a lot. Like us, Rena said matter-of-factly. When Mommy left. Yeah, baby. Like us. They went back the next week, and the week after that. Slowly, carefully, a friendship formed that none of them had been looking for, but all of them needed. Victoria was funny when she relaxed, with a sharp wit and a tendency towards self-deprecating humour that made the girls giggle. She was also surprisingly vulnerable, admitting when she was tired or in pain, letting them see her weakness without shame. She asked Isaiah about his new job, and when he confessed he felt like he was drowning in meetings and corporate speak, she offered to tutor him. They started meeting for coffee once a week, and Victoria taught him the unspoken rules of the business world, the politics and positioning that had nothing to do with actual work and everything to do with perception. You're good at this, she said one afternoon, looking over a proposal he'd written for improving workplace safety protocols. Better than most of the people my father pays 6 figures to write this kind of thing. I know the people it affects. That helps. It's more than that. You care. That's rarer than you think in corporate America. Isaiah studied her across the coffee shop table. She'd regained some weight, some color. The careful movements were less careful now. She was healing, slowly but surely. Can I ask you something? He said. Anything. Why do you work so hard for your father's company? You don't need the money. You could do anything you want. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. After my mother died, work was all my father had. It was how he survived his grief. And somewhere along the way, I decided that if I could just be good enough, valuable enough to the company, maybe he'd notice me the way he noticed quarterly earnings. She smiled sadly. Turns out I was pretty good at business, just not good enough to compete with my mother's ghost. Victoria, it's okay. I'm working through it, therapy and all that. Near-death experiences have a way of putting things in perspective. She reached across the table and touched his hand, careful of the still healing scars. You gave me a second chance, Isaiah. Not just at life, at figuring out what I actually want from it. And what do you want? She pulled her hand back, wrapping it around her coffee cup. I'm still figuring that out, but I know it involves being around people who are real, who don't put on masks for me. People like you and Rena and Leah. Isaiah felt something shift in his chest, something that felt dangerous and hopeful at the same time. Over the following weeks, Victoria became a fixture in their lives. She came to Rena's science fair and made appropriately impressed noises over the volcano. She helped Leah with a book report. She showed up at their apartment with takeout on nights when Isaiah was too exhausted from his new job to cook, and she sat on their worn couch like she belonged there. Julian Hartwell watched the growing friendship with what looked like satisfaction. One day, he called Isaiah into his office. You've done good work these past few months, Julian said without preamble. The safety improvements you've implemented are already showing results. Fewer injuries, better morale, increased productivity. Thank you, sir. I'm not finished. Julian leaned back in his leather chair. I'm expanding your role. I want you to head up a new initiative, community outreach and employee and welfare. We're going to start programs for employees' children, scholarships, after-school care, support for single parents. He smiled slightly. Think you can handle that? Isaiah's mind was racing. That would be incredible. Yes, absolutely. Good, because it was Victoria's idea, and she'll be working with you on it, co-directors of the program. Of course it was Victoria's idea. Isaiah should have known. That night, he called her. I talked to your father. I know. Are you mad? Why would I be mad? Because I went behind your back, pushed my father to expand your role, used my privilege to manipulate the situation. She sounded genuinely worried. Isaiah laughed. Victoria, you're using your privilege to help people, to help kids whose parents are working 3 jobs to make ends meet. How could I be mad about that? Really? Really? But you're going to have to actually work with me, not just put your name on it. I was hoping you'd say that. He could hear the smile in her voice. Partners? Partners. What Isaiah didn't say, what he was just beginning to acknowledge to himself, was that somewhere along the way, his feelings for Victoria had started to shift. She wasn't just the woman he'd saved anymore. She wasn't just his friend. She was becoming something more, something that terrified him because people like him didn't end up with people like her. That wasn't how the world worked. But when Rena said goodnight and added, I hope Victoria comes over tomorrow, and Leah drew a picture of the 4 of them together, Isaiah let himself wonder if maybe, just maybe, the world could work differently than he thought. 3 months after the accident, Victoria asked if she could take the girls to the park while Isaiah finished some work. He agreed, and she showed up at their apartment in jeans and a sweater, looking more relaxed than he'd ever seen her. The girls ran to her like she was family, hugging her tight. We'll be back in an hour, Victoria promised. Isaiah watched from the window as they walked to the park down the street, Rena holding Victoria's left hand, Leah holding her right, and his heart did something complicated in his chest. He was falling for her. God help him, he was falling for Victoria Hartwell, and he had absolutely no idea what to do about it. The community outreach program launched in January, 4 months after the accident that had brought Isaiah and Victoria together. They called it the Hartwell Hope Initiative, and it started small. After-school care at 3 Hartwell Industries facilities, a scholarship fund for employees' children, and the emergency assistance program for families in crisis. Isaiah and Victoria worked side by side, often late into the evening, building something neither of them had quite imagined. Victoria brought her business acumen and her family's resources. Isaiah brought his lived experience and his understanding of what struggling families actually needed. Their first disagreement came during a planning meeting when Victoria proposed offering financial literacy classes to program participants. Financial literacy, Isaiah repeated, an edge in his voice. Victoria, these are people working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. They don't need someone lecturing them on budgeting. That's not what I meant, Victoria said, her own voice rising. I thought practical skills like understanding credit, avoiding predatory lending. You think they don't know about predatory lending? They live it every day. What they need is better wages, not classes on how to stretch poverty thinner. The silence in the conference room was deafening. Their small team of coordinators suddenly found the floor very interesting. Victoria's face had gone pale, then red. You're right, she said quietly. I'm sorry. I was thinking like someone who's never had to worry about money. That's exactly the blind spot you're here to catch. Isaiah felt his anger deflate. I'm sorry for snapping. No, don't apologize. That's what we're doing here. Balancing perspectives. She made a note on her tablet. What do they need instead? Childcare, healthcare, one less thing to worry about, maybe career development, paths to better paying positions within the company. Victoria nodded, typing rapidly. What if we partnered with a local community college? Offer tuition assistance and schedule flexibility for employees who want to pursue certification programs or degrees. Yeah, Isaiah said, feeling the tension ease. Yeah, that could work. After the meeting, Victoria caught his arm in the hallway. Thank you for calling me out. I need that. I could have done it nicer. I don't want nice. I want real. She smiled, but there was vulnerability in her eyes. That's what you've always given me. Don't stop now. These moments happened regularly, clashes of perspective that could have driven them apart, but instead brought them closer. Isaiah learned that Victoria's privilege didn't make her stupid or uncaring. She was genuinely trying to understand a world she'd never experienced. And Victoria learned to step back, to listen, to trust Isaiah's judgment, even when it contradicted everything she'd been taught. The program grew faster than either of them expected. Word spread among Hartwell Industries' 5,000 employees that there was real help available, not corporate lip service. Single parents found quality after-school care for their children. Families in medical crisis received financial assistance without humiliating bureaucracy. 3 employees enrolled in nursing programs with company support. The local news picked up the story. A reporter interviewed Isaiah, asking him how it felt to go from maintenance worker to program director. Isaiah, uncomfortable under the camera lights, said simply, I know what it's like to need help and be too proud to ask. This program says you don't have to be proud, you just have to show up. The segment aired on a Thursday evening. By Friday morning, it had gone viral. Suddenly, Isaiah's phone was ringing with interview requests, speaking invitations, questions from other companies about replicating the program. It was overwhelming and uncomfortable, and Isaiah hated every minute of the attention. You need to embrace this, Victoria told him over coffee that Saturday. Your story matters. It inspires people. I'm not a story. I'm just a guy who made a choice. You're a guy who made a choice that's now helping hundreds of families. That's not just anything. She stirred her coffee absently. People need heroes, Isaiah. Real ones. Not billionaires in fancy suits. Regular people who do extraordinary things. I'm not comfortable being anyone's hero. I know. That's what makes you perfect for the role. Rena and Leah, sitting at a nearby table working on their homework, kept glancing over at them and whispering to each other. Isaiah had caught them doing that more often lately, having their private twin conversations while shooting looks between him and Victoria. Later that evening, after Victoria had gone home and the girls were supposedly brushing their teeth, Rena appeared in the living room doorway. "Daddy, do you like Victoria?" Isaiah looked up from his laptop. "Of course I like her. She's my friend." "No, I mean like her. The way people like each other in movies." Every parenting book Isaiah had never read definitely didn't cover this conversation. "Why are you asking me that, baby girl?" "Because you smile different when she's around. And you check your phone a lot to see if she texted. And last week, you wore your nice shirt to work 3 days in a row." Out of the mouths of 8-year-olds. Isaiah closed his laptop and patted the couch beside him. Rena climbed up, followed by Leah, who'd clearly been eavesdropping from the bathroom. "Okay," Isaiah said carefully. "Let's say, hypothetically, that Daddy did like Victoria that way. How would you two feel about it?" The twins exchanged another one of their looks. Then Leah said, "We like Victoria. She's nice to us. She doesn't pretend like some grown-ups do." "She laughs at my jokes," Rena added, "even the ones that aren't funny." "But," Isaiah prompted, because he could hear the hesitation. "But what if she leaves like Mommy did?" Leah's voice was small. "What if we love her, and then she goes away?" Isaiah's heart cracked. He pulled them both close, one under each arm. "Listen to me. What happened with your mum had nothing to do with you. She left because she wasn't ready to be a parent, and that was about her, not you. You are both so lovable." "But what if Victoria leaves?" Rena insisted. "I don't think she will. But baby, here's the truth. Loving people is always a risk. They might leave. They might hurt us. But the alternative is never loving anyone, and that's a lot lonelier." He kissed the top of Rena's head, then Leah's. "How about this? If Daddy and Victoria ever become more than friends, we all talk about it together. As a family. Nothing happens without you two being part of the conversation. Deal? Deal," they said in unison. But the conversation stayed with Isaiah, gnawing at him. His daughters had already lost one mother. What right did he have to bring someone into their lives who might not stay? Victoria came from a different world. Eventually, she'd realized that slumming it with a former maintenance worker and his kids had lost its novelty. Eventually, she'd want someone from her own social circle, someone who knew which fork to use at fancy dinners and didn't feel uncomfortable at country clubs. He started pulling back, subtly, keeping their interactions professional. Declining invitations to casual coffee, making excuses when Victoria suggested getting together with the girls. If she noticed, she didn't say anything, but there was a confusion in her eyes that made him feel like garbage. 2 weeks into his self-imposed distance, Julian Hartwell called him into his office again. "Sit down, Isaiah," Julian said, and there was something in his tone that made Isaiah's stomach clench. "If this is about the program budget, this is about my daughter." Julian steepled his fingers, studying Isaiah with those sharp blue eyes. "She won't tell me what's wrong, but something is. And it started about 2 weeks ago, the same time you stopped acting like her friend and started treating her like a colleague you barely tolerate." Isaiah shifted in his chair. "I don't know what you mean." "Don't insult my intelligence. I've been watching you two work together for months. I've seen how she lights up around you, how you look at her when you think no one's paying attention." Julian leaned forward. "I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to really hear it. After my wife died, I threw myself into building this company because it was easier than feeling the grief. I told myself I was providing for Victoria, securing her future. But what she needed was her father. She needed someone to see her, not as an asset or a legacy, but as a person. Isaiah didn't know what to say, so he stayed silent. You see her, Julian continued. You've seen her from the beginning. Not the Hartwell name or the money or what she can do for you. Just her. And she sees you the same way. So whatever fear is making you push her away, I need you to ask yourself if it's worth it. With all due respect, sir, you don't understand. I don't understand what it's like to feel inferior because of money. You're right. I don't. But I understand what it's like to lose people you love because you were too afraid to be vulnerable. I understand what it's like to wake up one day and realize you've built a fortune but lost everything that mattered. Julian's voice roughened. Don't make my mistakes, Isaiah. Life's too short and the people we love are too precious. Isaiah left the office feeling like he'd been turned inside out. He went through the rest of the day on autopilot, and when 5 o'clock came, he found himself sitting in his car in the parking lot, staring at his phone. He pulled up Victoria's number, stared at it, put the phone down, picked it up again. Finally, he called. She answered on the third ring. Isaiah. Just his name, but he could hear the hurt underneath it. Can we talk? In person? When? Now? There was a pause. Come to my place. I'll text you the address. Victoria didn't live in her father's mansion. Isaiah discovered she had a townhouse in Virginia Highland, a neighborhood that was nice, but not ostentatious. She answered the door in yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt, her hair in a messy bun, and she'd never looked more beautiful. Come in, she said quietly. The townhouse was decorated simply, with comfortable furniture and bookshelves crammed full and framed photos on every surface. Isaiah recognized himself and the girls in several of them, moments captured over the past few months. There was one of all four of them at the park, Rena and Leah making silly faces while Isaiah and Victoria laughed. I've been an idiot, Isaiah said, without preamble. Victoria sat down on the couch and tucked her feet under her. I'm listening. I got scared. The girls asked me if I liked you, liked you, and I panicked because what if I screw this up? What if you realize you can do better? What if my daughters lose someone else they care about? So your solution was to push me away preemptively. Victoria's voice was sharp. Make the decision for me about what I want. Yes, I know, it was stupid. It was insulting. She stood up, agitated now. Do you think I'm playing here, Isaiah? Do you think the past 6 months have been some kind of charity project or boredom cure for me? No. Because I have spent my entire life with people who wanted things from me. My name, my money, my connections. And then you came along, this man who risked his life for me without knowing who I was or what I could do for him. This man who challenges me and calls me out and treats me like a person instead of a Hartwell. Her eyes were bright with tears. And somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you, with your integrity and your terrible dad jokes and the way you love your daughters, with all of it. The world tilted. You... What? I love you, you idiot. Victoria wiped at her eyes angrily. I love you, and I love Rena and Leah, and I want to be part of your lives if you'll let me. Not as the woman you saved, not as your boss's daughter, just as Victoria, as myself. Isaiah crossed the room in 3 strides and cupped her face in his scarred hands. I love you too. I've been in love with you for months, and it terrifies me. Why? Because I come with complications, 2 daughters who need stability, a dead-end past and an uncertain future, debt and damage, and... Victoria kissed him, cutting off the litany of his perceived inadequacies. It was soft and tentative at first, then deeper, more certain. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against his. I don't want perfect, she whispered. I want real. I want you. I want you too. God, Victoria, I want you too." They stood there holding each other while the sun set outside and the world rearranged itself into something new. Eventually, they migrated to the couch, talking about everything they'd been too afraid to say. Isaiah told her about his ex-wife, about the fear of not being enough that had haunted him his entire life. Victoria told him about growing up lonely in a mansion, about the pressure to be perfect, about the accident that had made her question everything. "When I woke up in the hospital, my first thought was that I'd wasted so much time," Victoria said, her head resting on Isaiah's shoulder. "Working for my father's approval, dating men who looked good on paper but made me feel nothing, performing this version of myself that everyone expected. And then I met you, and you didn't expect anything from me except honesty." "The girls are going to lose their minds," Isaiah said. "Good minds or bad minds?" "Probably good. They asked me if I liked you. I think they've been plotting to get us together." Victoria laughed, the sound bright and joyful. "Smart girls. The smartest." Isaiah tilted her chin up to look at him. "But we need to take this slow. For them. I need to make sure they're okay with this, that they feel safe. Of course, whatever they need, whatever you all need." They talked until almost midnight, making plans and setting boundaries and imagining a future that felt both terrifying and inevitable. When Isaiah finally drove home, his heart felt lighter than it had in years. Mrs. Chen was asleep on his couch, and he woke her gently. She took one look at his face and smiled. "You told her," she said. "How did you—" "Please, I have eyes." She patted his cheek. "Good. You both deserve happiness." The next morning, Isaiah sat down with Rena and Leah over breakfast and told them that he and Victoria wanted to be more than friends. The girls screamed and jumped around the kitchen and declared it the best news ever, and Isaiah wondered why he'd ever doubted. The relationship developed slowly, carefully, with the girls' needs always at the center. Victoria came to family dinners. She helped with homework. She learned to braid hair through trial and many errors. She was patient with the boundaries Isaiah set and honest when things felt hard, because it wasn't all easy. There were moments when Victoria's privilege showed, when she'd suggest something expensive without thinking, and Isaiah would have to remind her that not everyone could casually drop $100 on concert tickets. There were moments when Isaiah's insecurity reared up, when he'd snap at Victoria over something small because he was really angry at the voice in his head that said he didn't deserve this. But they worked through it. They communicated. They showed up for each other. The Hartwell Hope Initiative continued to grow. By summer, they'd expanded to all Hartwell Industries facilities across Georgia. 50 children were enrolled in after-school programs. 12 employees were pursuing degrees with company support. The Emergency Assistance Fund had helped 32 families through medical crises, car breakdowns, and other disasters that used to mean choosing between rent and food. And then Victoria had an idea that would change everything again. "What if we extended the program beyond our employees?" she said during a planning meeting. "What if we partnered with homeless shelters and hospitals? Brought the girls with us to visit kids who need to see that people care?" Isaiah looked at her. "You want Rena and Leah to visit shelters?" "I want to show them that helping people isn't something you do once. It's a way of living. You taught me that, Isaiah. That night on the highway wasn't a one-time thing for you. It was who you are. I want to be that person too, and I think the girls already are." He thought about his daughters, who'd taken their allowance money to buy supplies for the after-school program, who'd made welcome cards for every new child who enrolled, who'd asked, just last week, if they could donate their old toys to kids who didn't have any. "Okay," he said. "Let's do it." They started small. Once a month, they'd visit a children's hospital or a family shelter. Rena and Leah would bring books and toys, would play with kids who had so little, would share their light and laughter without hesitation. Victoria would organize activities, and Isaiah would talk to parents, offering resources and hope. The first time they visited Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, Isaiah watched Leah sit beside a girl undergoing chemotherapy, both of them coloring quietly together. He watched Rena challenge a boy with a broken leg to a card game and purposely lose to make him smile. He watched Victoria read stories to a group of sick children with the same care and attention she'd given to quarterly reports. And he understood that what had started as a split-second decision on a rainy highway had rippled outward in ways he could never have imagined. He'd saved one life, and that life had helped him save his own. Together, they were creating ripples that would touch hundreds, maybe thousands of people. On the drive home, Rena said, "Daddy, why do some kids not have homes?" Isaiah glanced at Victoria, who was in the passenger seat. She nodded, encouraging him to answer honestly. "Sometimes life is really hard for grown-ups," Isaiah said carefully. "Sometimes people lose their jobs or get sick or have bad things happen, and they can't afford a place to live. It's not fair, and it's not right, but it happens." "But we're helping them," Leah said. It wasn't a question. "We're trying, baby. We can't fix everything, but we can help some people. Sometimes that's enough." "No," Rena said, firmly. "It's not enough. We need to help more people." Victoria turned in her seat to look at the girls. "You're absolutely right. What if we started a scholarship fund specifically for kids in shelters? Help them go to college so they can build better futures?" "Yes," both girls said together. Isaiah felt his throat tighten. "You two are going to change the world." "We learned from you, Daddy," Leah said simply. That night, after the girls were asleep, Isaiah and Victoria sat on his apartment balcony, a cramped little space, barely big enough for 2 chairs, and looked at the Atlanta skyline. "I've been thinking," Victoria said, "about what comes next." "Next? For us, for the program, for everything." She took his hand, lacing their scarred and unmarred fingers together. "I want to make this permanent. The program, I mean. Create a foundation, something that outlasts my father's company. Something that becomes its own thing. That's a big undertaking. I know, but I think we can do it. Together." She squeezed his hand. "And I've been thinking about other things too. Personal things." Isaiah's heart rate picked up. "What kind of personal things?" "The kind where I tell you that I want this. Us. Not just dating, but building a real life together. The kind where I ask if you've thought about what that might look like." He had thought about it. Late at night, when he couldn't sleep. Early in the morning, when he woke up and reached for his phone to text her. In the quiet moments when he watched her with his daughters and imagined forever. "I've thought about it," he admitted. "But Victoria, I come with a ready-made family. If we do this, if we build a life together, that means Rena and Leah come first. Always. I know. That's what I love about you. That's what I want." She turned to face him fully. "I'm not asking you to marry me right now. I know it's too soon. But I'm asking if you can see that future, if you want it too." "Yes," Isaiah said without hesitation. "Yes, I want that future." Victoria smiled, the kind of smile that lit up her entire face. "Good. Then let's build it. Slowly. Carefully. Together." 6 months later, on a warm spring evening, Isaiah and Victoria stood in front of 200 people at a fundraising gala for what was now called the Hope Foundation. The event was held at a downtown Atlanta hotel, and Isaiah was wearing a suit that Victoria had helped him pick out. He still felt uncomfortable in formal wear, but he'd learned that sometimes discomfort was part of showing up. "A year ago," Isaiah began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "I was driving home in a rainstorm. I was late, tired, and thinking about getting back to my daughters. And then I saw a car on fire. The room was silent, every eye on him. I had maybe 30 seconds to make a choice. Drive past and get home safe, or stop and risk everything for a stranger. I stopped, not because I'm a hero or special. I stopped because I thought about my daughters, I thought about what I'd want someone to do if it were them in that car. He glanced at Victoria, standing beside him. The woman I pulled from that car changed my life, not just with opportunities or resources, though those came, but by showing me that sometimes when you reach out to help someone, they reach back. And together, you can create something bigger than either of you imagined. Victoria stepped forward. Isaiah saved my life, but over this past year, he's taught me how to actually live it, how to show up, how to see people, how to turn privilege into purpose. Her voice cracked slightly. The Hope Foundation exists because one man made one choice on one night, but it continues because hundreds of people are making that same choice every day, to show up, to help, to care. They shared the stage with 3 families whose lives had been changed by the program. A single mother who'd earned her nursing degree with foundation support and now worked at Grady Memorial. A father of 4 whose medical emergency had been covered by the Assistance Fund, preventing bankruptcy. A teenager who'd lived in a shelter and was now attending Georgia Tech on a Hope Foundation scholarship. By the end of the evening, they'd raised $2.3 million. Enough to expand to 3 more states, enough to help thousands more families. Isaiah found Rena and Leah in the crowd. They'd insisted on coming, dressed in matching blue dresses that Victoria had helped them pick out. They ran to him, and he scooped them both up, even though they were getting too big for it. "We're so proud of you, Daddy," Leah whispered. "Proudest daughters ever," Rena added. "I'm the proudest daddy ever," Isaiah said, his voice rough. "You two are my everything." Mrs. Chen appeared, offering to take the girls home so Isaiah and Victoria could stay for the after-party. The girls hugged them both goodbye, and Isaiah noticed how naturally they folded Victoria into their embraces now, how she'd become family without anyone having to declare it. Later, when the crowds had dispersed and they were walking to the parking garage, Victoria slipped her hand into Isaiah's. "I have something for you," she said. "Victoria, we talked about this. You can't keep buying me things. It's not that kind of gift. Just here." She pulled a small box from her purse and handed it to him. Isaiah opened it carefully. Inside was a key. "It's to my townhouse," Victoria said quickly. "I'm not asking you to move in. The girls need stability, and I know your apartment is their home. But I want you to have it. I want you to feel like my place is your place too, like you belong there." Isaiah stared at the key, such a small thing that meant so much. "I love you," he said. "I don't say it enough, but I love you so much it scares me sometimes." "I love you too, all 3 of you," Victoria smiled. "And someday, when the time is right, we'll figure out what comes next. But for now, this is enough. This is everything." They stood in the parking garage, expensive clothes and calloused hands, and 2 people who'd found each other in the most unlikely way. And Isaiah thought about ripples again. How one choice creates a wave that touches everything around it. How saving one life had somehow saved his own. 2 years after the accident, on a cool November evening, Isaiah took Rena and Leah to the spot on Highway 285 where everything had changed. There was a small memorial there now, placed by Victoria. Not to the accident, but to second chances. A simple plaque that read, "Here, a stranger became family, and fear became courage." "This is where it happened?" Rena asked, looking at the unremarkable stretch of highway. "This is where I met Victoria," Isaiah confirmed. "It doesn't look special," Leah observed. "Most important places don't," Isaiah said. "They're just regular spots where extraordinary things happen because someone makes a choice." They stood there for a few minutes in silence. Then Isaiah pulled out his phone and called Victoria, putting her on speaker. "We're at the spot," he said. "I wish I could be there with you." "You're always with us." Isaiah looked at his daughters, at their serious faces as they contemplated the place that had altered all their lives. "Girls, I have something to tell you. I wanted to do it here, where our story with Victoria started. "Are you getting married?" Rena blurted out. "Because if you are, we want to be flower girls." Isaiah laughed. "Not yet, but soon. And yes, absolutely flower girls. But that's not what I wanted to tell you. Victoria and I have been talking, and we've decided to make a big change." "What kind of change?" Leah asked cautiously. "The Hope Foundation is growing so big that we need to work on it full time, which means I'm leaving my job at Hartwell Industries, and Victoria is too." "But Daddy, how will we afford things?" Rena's voice was worried. Victoria's voice came through the phone, gentle and sure. "The foundation will pay both me and your daddy a salary. Not as much as we make now, but enough, more than enough. And we'll be doing work that matters, helping people every single day." "We wanted you both to be part of this decision," Isaiah added, "because it affects all of us. It might mean a smaller house than we planned, fewer vacations, simpler things." The twins looked at each other, having one of their silent conversations. Finally, Leah said, "Will we still be able to help kids at the hospital?" "Even more than before," Victoria said. "Then it's okay," Rena declared. "Money isn't the most important thing. Helping people is." Isaiah's eyes burned. "When did you two get so wise?" "We learned from you," they said in unison. That night, after the girls were asleep, Victoria came over. She let herself in with the key Isaiah had given her months ago, kicked off her shoes, and curled up beside him on the couch. "They really said yes?" she asked. "They really did. They're incredible." "They're yours." Of course they're incredible." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "Are you scared? About leaving the job security?" "Terrified, but also more certain than I've ever been about anything." Isaiah pulled her closer. "We're going to do good work, Victoria. Real work. The kind that changes lives." "We already are." "Then we'll do more." They sat in the quiet apartment, two people who'd found each other in fire and built something beautiful from the ashes. Outside, Atlanta hummed with life, thousands of people going about their evenings, unaware that in this small apartment, a former maintenance worker and a billionaire's daughter were planning to change their world. 5 years after the accident, the Hope Foundation operated in 12 states. They'd helped over 10,000 families, funded 300 college scholarships, built partnerships with 50 hospitals and shelters, and they were just getting started. Isaiah and Victoria had married in a small ceremony 3 years prior, with Rena and Leah as flower girls just as promised. They'd bought a modest house together, something bigger than Isaiah's old apartment, but nothing like the mansion Victoria had grown up in. It was just right for their family of 4, because that's what they were now. A family. Isaiah had offered to let Victoria adopt the girls legally, but she'd said she didn't need a piece of paper to be their mother. Still, Rena and Leah had started calling her mom about a year into the marriage, and Victoria had cried for an hour the first time she'd heard it. Julian Hartwell had retired and made the foundation the primary recipient of his philanthropic efforts. He spent his Sundays having dinner with his daughter and her family, making up for the years he'd been too consumed by work to be a real father. He'd become a surprisingly wonderful grandfather, teaching Rena about chess and taking Leah to art museums. Mrs. Chen still lived next door, even though they'd moved to a different neighborhood. When the house beside theirs had gone up for sale, they'd bought it for her. She'd protested, but not too hard. Family took care of family. On the 5th anniversary of the accident, the local news asked to do a follow-up story. Isaiah almost said no, but Victoria convinced him. "People need to know that happy endings are real," she said, "that choosing courage can change everything." So they did the interview, all 4 of them. The reporter asked Rena and Leah what they'd learned from their father's heroism. Rena, now 13 and already taller than Victoria, said, "I learned that being scared and being brave aren't opposites. You can be both at the same time." Leah, quieter but no less fierce, added, "I learned that family isn't just blood. It's who shows up, who stays, who chooses you every day." The reporter turned to Victoria. What would you say to the woman you were before the accident? Victoria thought for a long moment. I'd tell her that everything she's looking for, purpose, family, love, is coming. But she has to survive first. She has to hold on through the hard part, because the best part of her life is on the other side of that burning car. And you, Mr. Carter, if you could go back to that rainy night, knowing everything that would happen, would you still stop? Isaiah looked at his family, his daughters, his wife, the life they'd built together. He thought about the thousands of people they'd helped, the ripple effect that continued to expand. He thought about the scared, tired man he'd been, driving home late and feeling like nothing would ever change. I'd stop every time, he said. Not for what came after, though I'm grateful for all of it. I'd stop because it was the right thing to do, because someone needed help and I could give it. Everything else, the foundation, the love, the family, that's grace. That's the universe rewarding a choice that shouldn't have needed a reward. But it did get rewarded, the reporter pressed. Sometimes it does. Sometimes you help someone and nothing comes back to you except the knowledge that you helped. Both outcomes are okay. Both are worth it. Isaiah reached over and took Victoria's hand. I got lucky. I helped someone who helped me back. But even if none of this had happened, I'd still want to be the kind of man who stops. The kind of father who teaches his daughters that we take care of each other. The interview aired that night. By morning, it had been viewed 3 million times. People shared their own stories of helping strangers, of being helped by strangers. The Hope Foundation's donation page crashed from traffic. Isaiah's phone rang off the hook for days. Other cities wanted to start similar programs. Companies wanted to partner with them. Colleges wanted him to speak to their students. We can't do it all, he told Victoria, overwhelmed by the response. No, but we can do our part, and we can inspire others to do theirs. She smiled. That's how movements start, Isaiah. One person makes a choice, then another person, then another. Pretty soon, you've changed the world. I didn't change the world. I just pulled you out of a car. You changed my world. You changed Rena and Leah's world. You've changed thousands of people's worlds through the foundation. Victoria moved closer, resting her head on his shoulder. That's not nothing. That's everything. Years passed. Rena went to college on a full scholarship and came back to work for the Hope Foundation, bringing fresh ideas and fierce passion. Leah became an artist, donating portions of her sales to the foundation and teaching art classes at shelters. Isaiah's hair started to grey. Victoria's did too. They celebrated anniversaries and birthdays and ordinary Tuesdays. They fought sometimes about money or priorities or whose turn it was to do dishes. They made up and remembered why they'd chosen each other. The foundation grew and changed, adapting to new needs and new challenges. They launched mental health services. They created job training programs. They partnered with affordable housing initiatives. Always, the mission stayed the same: show up for people who need help. On his 60th birthday, Isaiah stood in front of a crowd at the foundation's annual gala and looked out at a sea of faces. Former scholarship recipients, who were now doctors, teachers, engineers. Parents whose children had received care through their programs. Volunteers who gave their time because they believed in the mission. 30 years ago, Isaiah began, I made a choice on a rainy highway. I stopped to help a stranger. That choice led to this room, this foundation, all of you. But here's what I want you to understand. I'm not special. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who decided that when faced with another person's pain, I couldn't look away. He paused, looking at Victoria in the front row, still beautiful, still his everything. We all have those moments, every single day. Someone needs help in the grocery store. A coworker is struggling. A neighbor is alone. A stranger is in trouble. And every single time, we have a choice. Look away or show up. Drive past or stop. Isaiah smiled. The Hope Foundation exists because I chose to stop, but it continues because thousands of you choose to stop every day. You show up. You help. You prove that kindness isn't dead. It's just waiting for someone to act first. The applause was thunderous, but Isaiah barely heard it. He was looking at his family, Victoria, Raina, Leah, and Leah's new baby daughter, named Sophie after Isaiah's mother. He was looking at Julian, 85 and still sharp, still proud of the daughter who'd found her purpose. He was looking at Mrs. Chen, 90 now and still fierce. This was the ripple. This was what happened when one person chose courage over fear, connection over isolation, love over indifference. After the gala, the family gathered at the house. They ate leftovers and told old stories and laughed until they cried. Little Sophie fell asleep in Isaiah's arms, and he rocked her gently, marveling at how life circled back on itself. "What are you thinking?" Victoria asked, settling beside him. "That I'm the luckiest man alive. That I get to hold my granddaughter and know she's going to grow up in a family that teaches her to stop when someone needs help. That everything I've built is going to outlast me." Isaiah looked at his wife. "That I loved you from the moment you opened your eyes in that hospital and asked me if I was an angel. You never told me I said that. The pain meds were strong. You said a lot of things." He smiled, "but I remember all of them. I remember every moment since that night because you made my life worth remembering." Victoria kissed him softly. "We made our lives worth remembering, together." In the kitchen, Rena and Leah were loading the dishwasher and arguing about whose turn it was, just like they had as children. Julian was telling Mrs. Chen a story that made her laugh. The house was full of noise and love and life. This was the happy ending. Not perfect, because life was never perfect, but real, hard-won, built on a foundation of a single choice made on a rainy highway 30 years ago. Isaiah Carter had saved Victoria Hartwell's life that night, but in all the ways that mattered, she'd saved his right back. And together, they'd built a legacy of hope that would ripple outward long after they were gone, touching lives they'd never meet, inspiring choices they'd never witness, proving that heroes don't need capes or superpowers. They just need to stop when someone needs help. They just need to show up when it matters most. They just need to choose courage over fear, over and over again, until it becomes who they are. And that, Isaiah thought as he held his granddaughter close, was the only kind of heroism that really mattered. The kind that changed the world one choice, one person, one moment at a time.